Real talk for real minds. You're listening to Candid Minds with Dr. T and friends. What sets high performers apart? Particularly, what characteristics have I noticed with high-performing clients and patients? And there's a level of grit, focus, resilience, adaptability, a lot of emotional maturity and regulation. And these are traits that allow people to navigate situations, particularly strong stressors, really well. And in previous interviews, when I spoke to R.C. Buford, James Lafferty, those that have navigated very high-pressure careers and also worked with athletes and high-level executives, those were themes that constantly came up as valuable attributes that differentiate successful, high-performing individuals from others. But thinking about it more as a psychiatrist, dissecting it more, what I noticed was it goes back to the fundamentals of cognitive behavioral therapy, particularly how an individual interprets a stimulus and then responds to it, which means there's a situation, something is either happening or not happening. It is our job to assign a meaning or an interpretation to that situation, and then we're going to feel a certain way. And I noticed that very high-performing individuals are very talented in the way they interpret a situation, whether it's something is happening or not happening, and translate that into very positive motivation, inspiration, and create a framework where they become more powerful to be more successful, right? And they constantly can navigate whatever's thrown at them to translate it into something that they can turn into something positive, use it, and take that momentum and push themselves even further forward. And that could be a negative or a positive stimulus, but the interpretation, the meaning that they assign to that stimulus is where the skill is, right? That's where I found that they're very, very powerful. And that applies to everything. And the opposite is also true. Individuals that assign a meaning to a situation that is paralyzing find it very difficult to overcome and succeed and be motivated and high performing. So that's the initial thought of reflecting on how high performers think differently. But stressful situations impact everyone, right? And it's a bit aggressive to ask every listener to be a high performer. But I think anyone listening can identify with a stressful situation and the fact that we have to navigate it. So I'm curious, Jackie, handling stressful times just in general, what would you recommend?
So I think that we learn to handle stressful times through our experiences. And that starts in childhood, that starts through our experiences in as being athletes or whatever it is that we, pursued as our passion as younger. And so I have two different perspectives on this, the therapist in me and then also the employee in me and the person that works very hard and has a certain mindset. And so they do obviously come together. And I personally feel that how you learn to cope and deal with things starts in your home. So I talk about this often. My mother was just a boss in all areas of life. And so the world could be crumbling around us, health issues, financial, whatever could happen. And she never made us feel like the world was crumbling. And so she gave us insight into, yes, something bad is happening, but as a family, we're going to get through this. And so that gave me the confidence that when things turn left, no matter how ugly they look, that I'll get through it. And so I think that even in the workplace now, I'm able to kind of put that there, right? And then you learn through your coaches, through your teachers, how they manage you when you're having a hard time. I was a competitive cheerleader. My coach was screaming in my face. I was not going to respond well, but I was fortunate to have coaches that taught me deep breathing, that taught me to visualize myself doing what I felt like I could not do, and really pushed me. And what's interesting is, as a therapist, we teach our patients those same type of tools, deep breathing, meditation, visualization, using CBT and the thought process to change change our negative thought processes. And that can start very young in the gym for you if you're an athlete. And the right coach can really set you up for the rest of your life. And so for me, I feel that I was very fortunate to have the right coaches. I watch my daughter now as an athlete and in her struggles have the right trainers in the gym around her, that as a mom, I might be panicking that it might not work out for her, but they are not. They're teaching her that resilience. But I think it's important. It's really important in order to be successful is to know how to manage your feelings. And as a parent, I'm learning that that looks very different in teaching a child how to manage their feelings. I'm not always succeeding, I'll tell you that much. It's a challenge, but the resilience starts in your home. And then as you get older, you might not have had the opportunity to have a parent like I had who the world didn't crumble for you guys. You might not have had consistency or somebody who was supported and taught you those coping mechanisms. But through therapy or different forms, you can get there. And so just because you didn't have a certain setup doesn't mean you can't retrain yourself and teach yourself. And so often in therapy, we're reframing. You're doing a lot of reframing of the thought processes. You're changing that negative thought. I can't is I can. I do that quite often at home is I don't want to hear you can't. I want to hear you'll try. I want to hear you can. Because once you start to tell yourself something, you start to believe it about yourself. And so I think sports strongly translate over to you as an adult in your professionalism and in your professional world. I think it's why who I am. I had the right circle of people around me. I had the right support from mom to coaches to parents of my teammates. I'm making sure that if you're a parent or you're a coach, to start setting that now for your kids, is start helping them now, teaching them the world doesn't crumble because things are not going your way, teaching them how to work through the toughness, but also allowing them to feel. And so that can be the difficult part. I know I struggle with that right now, is that you still have a child in front of you sometimes. And
Yeah.
I personally feel like we are grown-ups, but the inside of us is still that child. And so we seek the things that might have been missing when we were younger. We find peace and love and happiness in the things that brought us there when we were younger. And so I joke often, but we're all just big human bodies with little people inside of us, right? And so if you have the opportunity to be working with children in sports, if you have the opportunity to be raising a child, making sure you're teaching them that stuff, teach them the deep breathing, teach them the I can do this mentality. We use a lot of positive affirmations. I use that with my patients and in home is, looking at myself in the mirror and telling myself who I am. I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I can and I will accomplish this. And I think that can get you through some really challenging times. Is things start to go awry when you think the world is falling apart. And sometimes our worlds do fall apart. But when you feel like you have support or you have the coping mechanism to get through it, it's not as challenging. And so bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen all the time. But being able to work through it and having that resilience starts somewhere. And I truly feel it starts in sports and with children. And as adults, you carry that with you. And so, as the adult, though, is making sure that the people around you, the children around you, whoever it is that are in the room with you are experiencing that from you, is sharing that with others.
Yeah, I think hearing what you're saying though, I feel if I take the doctor hat off and the father hat on, it's hard to balance
Very
what is pushing a child to be resilient versus pushing them too much.
agreed.
And I don't know if sometimes if he says he doesn't want to do something or doesn't want to try, I want to push him and use the cognitive reframing to tell him that it's challenging, but he can do it and he should try and he's done it before. But then sometimes I wonder if am I overdoing it? Is this gonna be damaging because I pushed him beyond his comfort zone? And then I see other parents doing coddling their kids and letting them sit out every single time the kid wants to sit out. I'm like, well, that seems a little too much. So, I mean, it's certainly a balancing act.
It's very difficult, and there's a fine line. And I'll be honest, I haven't found that line right now. My daughter she's in a highly competitive sport. There's a lot of pressure at a young age, but really, I find that a lot of the children are putting the pressure on themselves, which
Mm,
unfortunate enough is I don't feel that she's experiencing that elsewhere. I tell her all the time, this is what you want to do. You don't want to do it. That's okay. You don't. But I also don't want to teach her to give up. And so
yeah,
just because times get tough doesn't mean you just quit. Just because things are not going the way you want them to go doesn't mean you just throw in the towel on the years of your hard work because it's not going your way today. And so I will tell you it's my biggest challenge as a parent because I see my child's potential. We know what they can do,
yeah.
right? And we know that they're capable, but sometimes they don't see that or feel that. And that can be very difficult because you don't want to push to the point that they're resentful or angry, but you also don't want to just give up on them because they're not able to believe in themselves in the moment.
That's true. I mean, reflecting even on myself, I would say I am a lot more thankful for my losses than I am for my wins. If my failures is where I learn.
Mhm.
Things that were a slam dunk and an easy layup. I mean, I'm proud of myself, right? And I know they've gotten me very far, but I've the person that you see today and my accomplishments today are more a result of my failures and my obstacles than my easy wins or things that fell on my lap.
And the failures and obstacles that you push through, not that you just gave up. And that's it, is that it can be very easy to just say, oh, well, you're failing at this, go
Yeah,
to something else,
yeah,
and that can be difficult because really a lot of the times the end game is where the reward is. But some people just never even make it to that because they don't have the skills or the support to fight through the tough times.
sure. And depends. I mean, depends how much you want it,
It's
right?
true.
If you really want it, you can get through that, and that requires a lot of mental toughness to get through adversity. And Nick, that reminds me of everything you've been through, having been in the spotlight of an entire country growing up, and then navigating some setbacks, but being resilient and pushing through. What do you attribute that to? The success there?
Yeah, well, I'm just hanging off every word you guys are saying because it's all, stuff that I totally, I think about, I agree with, I've been through. The whole thing about learning more from failure, that's probably my biggest. I've fallen flat on my face more times than I can count. And, when you come through that, that's where the real learning is. And not just learning in terms of what's going to get you a result in whatever endeavor it is that you're going through, but more so the learning in who you are, what you're all about, what actually means something to you, how far you can push yourself. And I think so much of it comes from facing that adversity and that the mental toughness, being able to push through things and become that kind of person. I think it's like anything else. It's a learned skill. It's a muscle. I didn't have a lot of that. I had it and then I didn't have it and then I developed it again. I grew up competing in sport at a really intense high level and I was very mentally tough in that area, but I neglected other parts of my life and then things fell apart. And then through that, I had to learn it again. But I had a big part where I sort of felt sheltered. I had too much help in the wrong areas and not enough help in the right areas. And I had to sort of learn and go through all these different challenges to find my own way of knowing that I, was able to, build that resilience and deal with everything. And I think that we aren't taught that enough. And I think parents do the best job you can, as you guys are talking about, but there's no parent that's going to be able to get it perfect. So it's really coming down to, I think, education in general in school. I don't think we're really taught anywhere near enough of this kind of stuff. And I think it's probably the most important skill we can possibly learn about how to, understand ourselves, how to deal with adversity, understanding that, life is actually not going to be easy. Life's not meant to be easy. I think we have a view that things should be easy. Why is it so hard for me? I think back and I remember saying to my mum, when I used to be struggling, Mum, but life's just so hard and why is it so hard for me and blah, blah, blah. And I look back now and I cringe a little bit because really I was just not, I was expecting everything to be easy and I was entitled. I thought I deserve everything. And everyone, it's not to dismiss hardships people go through. I know people have been through things 1,000 times more difficult than me, worse circumstances or whatever it is, but really understanding that life isn't going to be fair all the time. We only have our current given circumstances that are in front of us right now, and we have a choice of how we face that. And the more we can really be taught that, we need mentors. We need proper figures in our lives. We need to be taught that in schooling. We need that through parenting, and I think there's nowhere near enough of it in the world.
It's modeling, it's having people around you. And sometimes that's not always a parent, right? That's okay. It could be a teacher, it could be a coach, but modeling that when things do go south, how do we respond to it? If we lose that game, am I not going to talk to you and ignore you and be angry at you? Or instead, am I going to come back and show you what you could have done differently and teach you how things could have gone better? And so that behavior is being modeled from every single person that walks into your life. And you take on each piece from each individual, and then you put that into your own life. And so it's very impactful. And, we talk about the tools and techniques that are given in therapy, visualization, the changing of the thought process, deep breathing, but modeling is huge. And that sometimes that even happens in a therapy session where a patient is coming, they've never had somebody before be that calm within the storm. And so they come and they throw in everything at you. And if as a therapist, I'm telling them the world is over and this is catastrophic, obviously they're going to respond one way. But if I model how they could work through this, what coping skills they could use, how they can manage just stress. That's huge. And I think that that's a key component is teaching people how to manage stress. It comes in every chapter of life. It comes every single day in different ways. And if you never have that groundwork of how to manage just the basic amount of stress, never mind elevated, it's going to impact you for the rest of your life. No matter what field you choose to go into, you're going to find a stressful situation. And if you can't manage that, it will impact your ability to be successful.
So do you think negative modeling can also exist where parents are demonstrating the wrong way to handle loss or the wrong way to handle a bad play in sports or to handle failure inappropriately, and then children are learning that is how you're supposed to respond?
I think that it depends on the child. If you have a very insightful child, that could be helpful. I could only speak to my own experiences. Like I joke, my husband's a very competitive man. He was an athlete his whole life. He has a very strong perspective, and we've created a home that's very safe for our child to call things out. And so when he is modeling behavior that she doesn't think is acceptable, she'll tell him. And so that it's funny, and you don't always have that, and not everybody has a safe home to do that,
right?
But when your 6-year-old says like, Dad, I don't like that you're talking about it like that, or I don't like the way you said that, it's one eye-opener for the individual, but then two, if you have an insightful child, they can then say, that's not how I want to act when this happens, right? And so not to say that's the case in my home, but it depends on the child. But I have also heard kids say, I didn't like when my coach did that. I didn't like when my coach yelled at me, or, Mom, I don't want to be on that team because I didn't like when this was the reaction when we lost the game. And so for some children who are insightful and old enough and maybe have that maturity, it can be that's not a good response. That's not the way you're supposed to. Granted, that could be because they have the models who are doing it correctly. So if you're only having in your life a poor model where they're only displaying negative behaviors, I'm not sure that you would have that insight, if you didn't see the opposite side.
Interesting. One thing that comes to mind with modeling things correctly and incorrectly are traditional gender roles, and the thought that for a young boy or a young man, what is the traditional, more masculine response to adversity or conflict or failure? And then for young girls and young women, how should you respond to a challenge? There's the concept that you hear if a man is very assertive, it's considered appropriate. If a woman is too assertive, it could be misinterpreted, right?
Sounds like the story of my life.
Yeah, like it's true that if a strong woman will be considered a bitch, and then a strong man in a situation is a boss. Absolutely, right? And then you get mixed messages as to how he's supposed to handle adversity. Is it appropriate for a young girl to cry in a challenging situation? I think society still tells us yes. A young boy crying in the same exact situation, I could see a parent telling him to toughen up and handle it. So there's some mixed messages there as to how we are preparing individuals for mental toughness and not judging them using the same framework, right? And we're still falling into the trap of traditional gender roles. What do you guys think is the healthy way to handle this, right? There's even themes of like toxic masculinity that you hear thrown around, and that's a manifestation of a lot of things. I get that, but in the context of building resilience, overcoming challenges, handling failure, how do we balance the pressures from society and what makes the most sense to produce the safest mental health outcome?
I think you base it off of the child. And so the gender really does not matter. You know, there's so much research as of recently that say young boys who are coddled and loved and kissed and hugged by their father actually become extremely mentally tough. And so that speaks volumes of you don't need to tell a little boy, stop crying, tough it up, get it together. You could support them in the way that maybe they need to be supported in that moment, and they still will be tough. And so I'm learning now. I have a little boy as well, and it's a very different experience raising a boy over a girl, but different in the sense of what their needs are and how they act. But I think that you need to know your child, know the child that's in your life, whether you're the coach or a parent. And I think we need to throw out that expectation of get it together, you need to be tough, but also know when to turn it on in a sense. And so you don't need to look at a child and say, get it together, stop crying, you need to do this. You need to look at the child and say, what's going on? What can I do for you? How can I help you through this? There's a difference. That message is very different. And so how they will respond will look very different based off of how you approach them.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, does this resonate with some of the stuff you've experienced?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, not getting enough of that as a child, for me, for people that I've associated with, I've seen, that can be, have huge impacts. And yeah, I think if you haven't had enough nurturing, especially, as a man, like we're talking about, when we're made to feel that you meant to just work things out, toughen it out, it often does have that opposite effect where then we seek out behaviors and we're trying to fill a void. So we actually become, less mentally tough. I think the world's also gone, from extremes where a lot of the time now we're being taught that, if we are, suffering from a bit of stress or we're feeling anxious, then we should just not approach something at all. So it's gone far in that way. And, kids need to also learn that you're not always going to get the outcome you want, and not everyone should necessarily, get a trophy for just competing, because, that's also teaching you that that's not setting up for the real world. If you get taught that and you get, coddled in that way, then you're going to go out into the real world and get a shock. So I think there's, a part in that area. And then I think a lot of it comes down to, the old saying, we're a product of the top 5 people we spend our time with.
Yes.
It's another version of social media where if we're generally going to seek people that have things in common with us. And if we've got traumas, if we've got issues we're not facing, or we've got struggles, we're probably going to find people in a different way that have that. And we're going to all, support each other through that, but then not challenge each other to grow because we don't have the perspective ourselves. So I think really seeking relationships with people that are going to challenge you, that have been, have someone who is where you want to be. I know, for example, when I met my partner, one of the things that I loved and hated was the fact that she called me out on everything. And, sometimes you're wanting to literally put your head through a brick wall because you're hearing things that are so difficult to deal with and you're not able to run away from them anymore. But then when you work through it, it's this wave of relief and like, wow, why on earth did these other people around me not call me out on this stuff before? And why was I not calling other people out? But it's because we didn't have the awareness, because you're around people that are in that similar mindset. So it's so important that we, and it's hard to do because we don't have the awareness. How do you find that? But, really seeking out, challenging yourself, being around people with different perspectives rather than just hearing what we want to hear, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's excellent advice, Nick. I appreciate your input. At the end of the day, I don't think mental toughness is about being invincible, but knowing how to adapt, knowing how to interpret situations, looking at challenges and breaking them down into small bite-sized obstacles that you're able to manage and overcome, handling failure and interpreting and studying and learning from that as an opportunity to revisit the challenge and try again, and maintaining your persistence. At the end of the day, if I had to pick one word that got me through a lot of hard times, it was being persistent and tenacity, really being stubborn and not wanting to give up and not accepting no as an answer. And I think that's, that really is what pushed me through and continues to push me through. I meet adversity on a regular basis, and it's how I navigate it. So I think excellent points. I appreciate everyone's input and contribution to the conversation. Look forward to more conversations moving forward. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Please follow us or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow us at Mindful Care and at TikTok Psychiatrist for more. And don't forget to rate and review.